And oh boy, did I get some reactions. Some of them pretty mean. I just I just feel like people jump to conclusions before understanding where I'm coming from. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about something that's been on my mind because I've been seeing a lot of complaints. I've been seeing a lot of beef about this online. So I've been reading and watching so many conversations online about tipping culture in the US. As a Filipino, this is pretty interesting to me because, as most of you know, here in the Philippines, tipping is not really a big deal. It's something we don't stress about when we pay the bill at a restaurant. So we don't have a rule that says you must leave a tip. If we do leave something, it's often just the loose change, maybe a few pesos, because we just don't think of it as required part of the dining experience. So here, if a restaurant bill is 592, for example, and I hand over 600 pesos, I fully expect my 8 pesos in change back. If I decide to leave it there, it's more like, oh, it's too small anyway, just leave it here. We don't even call that a tip. It's just a leftover coins. And if we do give a tip, it's because we genuinely think that the service was good and we want to reward the waiter or the waitress. It's not an obligation, it's not a law, it's just a nice thing to do sometimes. And it's like saying, hey, thanks, you did a great job. But if not, no one's going to look at you funny. Now, in the United States, I always thought Americans loved tipping because it's their way of appreciating good service, like everywhere else. Wow, the server was so friendly. Let's give them a few extra dollars to say thank you. But I've been seeing a lot of people, Americans themselves, complaining about tipping, like it's getting out of hand. It's all over social media and even in some news reports actually. People are saying that tipping culture has gone too far. Some say it feels mandatory now that you have to tip regardless of the service quality. And if it's mandatory, then can we still call it a tip? Doesn't that defeat the whole point of tipping in the first place? So let's really think about this. Workers everywhere deserve fair wages. That's something we can all agree on, right? But in the US, it seems that servers rely heavily on tips to earn a decent living. This is confusing for me as an Asian, as a Filipino, because here the restaurant pays the staff directly. Their salary doesn't come from my pocket as a consumer, as a customer. Why is it that in the US the customer is expected to shoulder the extra cost on top of the meal price? Shouldn't the restaurants pay their workers a proper wage so they don't have to depend on the generosity of customers? I mean, wouldn't the restaurant still make money if they just included fair wages in their expenses and adjusted the pricing accordingly? No, really, it's an honest question. Are the businesses really not able to pay their employees a fair salary without relying on customers to fill in the gap? So I started wondering what happens if someone like me, a Filipino who's also very frugal and thrifty, who's used to not worrying about tips, goes to America and doesn't leave a tip. Will I get in trouble if I leave the restaurant without leaving a tip? Will the waiter chase me out of the restaurant demanding why I didn't leave any extra money? Will I be scolded, shamed, or treated like a terrible person just because I didn't follow the normal thing that people do in the US? Like, I mean, not tipping is not a crime there, right? You might think that's a silly question, but as a foreigner, it's a legit question. It's a concern. I'm not breaking any law. I'm just following what is normal to me. I might be seen as someone rude by American standards, maybe, yeah, but from my perspective, I'm just paying what's on the bill. Is that really wrong? I am really wondering, and it's a legit question. So I actually asked this question online. It's not very random though, because I saw a post prior to this question, prior to this post that I made. I made this post because I saw a question an American complaining about tips in the US that it's getting out of hand. That is where my question came from. And oh boy, did I get some reactions. Some of them pretty mean. Pretty, yeah, mean. So let me show you a few comments I received from this thread. I just I just feel like people jump to conclusions before understanding where I'm coming from. Okay, so comment number 1, if you can't afford to tip, then stay in your own country. Don't come to America. Why are you attacking me? Chill. I just asked a question. Isn't it smarter to learn about a country's culture before traveling there? So I don't accidentally offend anyone. It's not about being cheap or not affording to tip. For me, it's about understanding how the system works. Believe it or not, asking question is part of learning, in case you don't know. I'm not going to pack my bags and fly over just to what? Just to make a waiter feel bad or just to stiff a waiter. I'm just curious. Have you never been curious about something? Okay, another comment, ignorant foreigners like you just want to mooch off our system and don't respect our workers. What does mooch off means? Anyway, I do respect workers, of course. Why wouldn't I? That's exactly why I'm confused. If workers deserve fair wages, and they do, of course, why rely on tips as their main income? That's the point. Why not pay them well in the first place so they don't have to rely on customers' mood or generosity, like I said in the beginning? Me asking this question is not disrespecting anyone. It's trying to understand a system that feels so different from what I know, from the rest of the world. I think I've seen a lot of of comments on I've seen a lot of people commenting on complaints about tipping getting out of hand in the US, and even the Europeans say that this thing only happens in America. So I know that in Asia, tipping is really not a culture. It's not something that is heavy for us customers because you're not obliged to do that, not like in America. So I think this only happens in America, really. Another comment, you're just lazy and looking for reasons not to tip. Probably because you're cheap. Huh? What's the connection? It's called being interested and open-minded. Calling me cheap when you know nothing about my situation is harsh. You're so mean. Anyway, I never said I wouldn't tip in the US. Like I said, I'm not gonna go there just to do this thing. I am curious. I just ask what happens if I don't. Maybe I will end up tipping because that's what's expected, but I want to know the reason behind it. Why is it normal there and not here? You see, I think the reason people are getting defensive is because tipping for some Americans is tied up with fairness, gratitude, and even morality. Servers often rely on tips because their base pay is not enough. Of course, this is shocking from a Filipino perspective. In the beginning, I was like, why there's a lot of people complaining about tipping in the US, like it's getting out of hand. Like, I thought you guys have this tipping culture, but it's just like normal tipping. Like, you love tipping. If you appreciate the service, then you tip. But I want to understand the depth of this culture, because why is it getting out of hand? Like, I want to understand how deep this thing that it's becoming problematic nowadays. Because it's almost like the customers pay part of the server's salary. If you don't tip, it's like you're saying they shouldn't get a proper income. I think that's heavy moral load to put on a diner's shoulder. The thing is, if tipping is meant to reward good service, why is it treated as something you must do no matter what? That's why some Americans themselves are complaining. They're tired of feeling pressured. Maybe that's why I see so many online posts about people feeling awkward or upset about it. It can feel like this thing, unspoken rule that you have to follow or you'll be seen as a bad person. Like me, see? I just asked a question and then they automatically thought I'm a bad person. They called me names, they judged me already. As a Filipino, I can see both sides, okay? In the Philippines, we can relax about tipping. If we do it, great. If not, no problem. In the US, it's like embedded. It's like woven into the dining experience. The server expects it. And if you don't tip, it might create tension. I've seen a lot of videos about it. I don't know if they're just for the sake of content or likes or views, but I've seen a lot of videos like this in restaurants in America. It may not be illegal to not tip, but it's socially frowned upon. And I think if they can put you in jail in their heads, they would. Curiosity killed the cat, right? Now I know what it means. What happens if I don't tip and suddenly I'm the villain? Who knew that by wanting to learn, I could be accused of all sorts of things? Next time, maybe I should ask permission before asking the real question. I should ask permission to ask this question before I actually ask the question. What? So, my takeaway, what I've learned today, the US tipping culture is more complicated than I thought. It's not just about generosity. It's about an entire system that places the responsibility of workers' wage partly on the customer. Is that really partly? It's about social expectations, cultural differences, and the fear of looking like a jerk if you don't leave extra money on the table. As a Filipino, that's completely different from what I'm used to. But yeah, I'm learning about other culture. Sometimes it's surprising, sometimes it's confusing, and sometimes it makes people defensive. Am I going to be in trouble if I go to the US and don't tip? Okay, legally, no, right? Socially, maybe. If I ever do visit, I might just tip to keep peace, to not make drama, to not create tension. Or maybe I'll order takeout to avoid the pressure altogether. Or maybe I'm not gonna go to be safe. Anyway, thank you for sticking around and listening to me. I know it's so boring, but anyway, let's keep talking about these cultural differences in a friendly, open-minded way. If you have any thoughts, drop them in the comments below. And please, let's try to be nice to each other. See you in the next video.